Hey, folks, this is Jesse Cope back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are, whatever part of the day you're in. Sure to appreciate you joining me and giving me a little piece of your day. Hope it gives you something to look forward to, maybe something to talk about with a friend or spouse, or get your morning going, or wrap your day up in the evening. Either way, anyway, I'm glad that you're here. For those of you all that continue to come back, I'm very grateful for that as well. For those of you all that continue to share the podcast and tell others about it, thank you so much. Y'all help the podcast to grow. Homestead, there's a lot of things happening. I know that I have told you recently that there's not much because I haven't been able to get in the garden, but one of the apple trees that I thought we had lost is sprouting and or budding. We have a lot of little pears that are showing up on our largest pear tree. And I made a little progress on the duck coop. A little. So, Father, thank you for today. Thank you for this day that you have made. Thank you for the opportunity to wake up and for all the blessings that you bestow upon us, for all the wonder that we can see around us, from birds chirping to trees growing. Help us to seek you first, Father, to love you with all that we are, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to follow the commands of your Son, Jesus Christ. Be with our families. Be with those of us who are married. Strengthen our marriages. Be with those who lead our nation, Lord, those who protect our nation. Give them wisdom and courage and a strong faith. Bring them home safe to their families. Help us to turn back to you, Father, please, and do your will. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. The last little kitten we got, the girls have kind of turned into a partial indoor cat, meaning that they come inside during the day, sometimes for quite a while, and then end up going back outside. At any rate, the little kitten has found some flying insect that I can't see. It moves too fast for me, but she can see it. And so it looks like she's chasing air, which is always entertaining if you have cats. It's kind of like watching the dogs chase their own tail, or maybe it better would be when they start to bark at at apparently nothing. You see nothing, you hear nothing, they're just barking. Sometimes I wonder if they don't just do that. At any rate, you may not agree with this, folks, but I've seen quite a bit the last few days online talking about this. We pour all this time and energy into teaching our kids. Hopefully, we pour time and energy into teaching our children. But a lot of it today is directed towards sports or academic excellence. And there's there's benefit from that, but there's a point of diminishing return because for sports, for example, you've got a real short timeline on that. Even your most long-lived professional athletes, you know, you get to your 30s, your 40s, with only the rarest of exceptions, you're winding down. You talk about your academic professional career. We have, it's rare to see people work for decades at the same place anymore. But even if they do, you get into your 60s, really for some people before that, but you're starting to wind down. But your marriage, folks, the person you marry theoretically is forever, for as long as you live. The only thing in the world that's more important than your marriage is your faith, because that determines eternity. And whether you choose to believe in God and Jesus Christ or not, that still determines your eternity. That's the only decision that's bigger than your spouse. And after your spouse, you know, your children are pretty important. But there's a pretty big gap between God and your marriage, your spouse, and then everything else after that. You know, your children, you hope that you develop a good enough relationship with them that that lasts a lifetime. I've been very blessed in my father to have had a relationship like that. But you still, you know, one thing that my father always told me throughout all the years, and I know that he wanted me around more than I was sometimes, but he always made sure, especially after I was married, he said, you have to do what's best for your wife. And then when we had children, for your family. He said, whatever is best for y'all. If that means living nearby, 2,000 miles away, doing a job during the day, at night, whatever that is, that was, and I always knew that. You know, hopefully your children grow up and become productive citizens and move on with life. Hopefully, well, hopefully. And so that marriage, folks, that marriage is so important. Who you pick as a spouse, who you yoke yourself with, to use the New Testament terminology. But we don't treat it like that. How many of us, how many of y'all listening who have children, sit and talk to your children really in depth about what marriage is like? Money, sex, roles of men and women, faith, your your relationship with the church. How many of us really sit and talk to our kids about that as if that's the most important decision that they'll ever make in their lives? Because it is, folks. It's like faith in that regard. Whether you decide to get married or not, that has a huge impact on the rest of your life. If you decide not to get married and chase an academic career, that still has a huge impact because that not getting married, you chose the career over that, and so that becomes your focus. So that's life altering. If you choose to get married, that has to come before everything else except God. We just don't treat it that way today, folks, and we should. The reason I thought of that is because I was watching this cat play, and my brain went from that to how much joy animals bring entertainment, right? Like we went walking with the dogs out in the down the road and around and about last night. My wife and I did, and that was really enjoyable. But what was even more enjoyable was having our girls outside with us, riding their bikes up and down the road and sitting by a fire, which is one of the things, folks. I know I'm jumping all over the place, and we're not doing what I planned to anyway. One of the things, the really great tragedies about public education, and I'm a proponent of having. I know a lot of y'all think that I'm against public education. I'm not at all. I'm a huge proponent of public education. Just nothing like what it looks like today. And one of those aspects is the amount of time that children spend away from their parents. And the left has told us via feminism that women have to go outside the home to work or they're worthless. And the left told us 100 years ago via people like John Dewey that the whole goal of education from a communist leftist point of view was to separate children from church, from God, and their family. And they've done an outstanding job. And part of that, a huge chunk of that, is just simply time. The longer our kids are in public school, the less time we have to teach them, to spend with them, to develop those relationships. You think about, for example, for those of y'all that have children, especially those of y'all that have children that are junior high or high school age, and they're involved in one activity after another, whether it's art or music or sports or hunting or shooting, or it doesn't matter what it is. The list is long. They spend 8 hours in a classroom across most of America today, the vast majority of students, for about 10 months a year. And so we get them, if we're lucky, for about 2 months a year. And out of each day, if we're lucky, if we're honest, if you have a, if you're married and you're lucky enough to stay home with your kids as a wife, or you're a husband that's blessed enough to have a wife that stays home with their kids, then she gets to see them, or you, if you're the wife listening, you get to see them for a couple hours in the morning, maybe. And then in the evening, you pick them up afternoon, 3:30, 4, if they don't have any extracurricular activities, and you get to spend a few hours with them before they have to go to bed. If they have extracurricular activities, then you're not picking them up till 5:30, 6, 6:30, depending on the school and the activity. And so you bring them home. And the way public education is structured today, a lot of them have homework to do. And so maybe by the time they get done with all of their school responsibilities, you get to see them for about an hour, and they're exhausted and they're irritable. And rightly so. They've been in a prison a good chunk of the day. Interesting, the New York Times, I think, I may be blaming the wrong person here. I think it was a study out of Harvard, but I think I saw it. It was either via CNN or the New York Times. And they were talking about the dangers of homeschooling. And they had a, political cartoon that went along with the article. And it showed all these kids outside running around, playing, have a good time, who were obviously, the insinuation was that those were the public school kids that were outside. And then there was a home with a child looking through barred windows, right? Like they're in prison in the home. And then one wall that you could see of the home that was facing you was made out of books. And I don't remember all of the different books there, but one of them was the Bible. And and so the insinuation, of course, the danger of homeschooling is that the kid's going to be in prison. They're never going to leave the house, and they're going to be taught something as radical as the Bible. We used to teach the Bible as the primary textbook in public education. We don't anymore, unless you're being dishonest or ignorant. Public education has fallen by the wayside horribly. And that's a huge chunk of it, right? But going back to the time issue, you could take go a lot of different ways down this path. Going back to the time issue, we don't have much time with our kids. And so then, for example, if you want to take them to church during the week for like a youth group or something, or you want to go as a family, maybe you've got mass during the middle of the week. How exhausted are those kids that have been in public school all day? And then unless you've got just a phenomenal youth group leader, and there's some out there, which doesn't really solve the problem, but if you've got a phenomenal one, they might be able to keep the kids entertained, happy for a little while. Uh, but if you don't have one of those rare, really phenomenal youth group leaders, the kids are going to feel like they're right back in the classroom. So they spent all day at class, they did their extracurriculars, and then you want to take them to youth group, to church, and actually spend some time with God, something that's far more important than anything they're getting out of public school today. And they're exhausted. Well, same thing with your relationship with them as a parent. You want to come home and you want to, there's this societal conception out there that teenagers, and I've done this a couple times, so I can talk with some expertise on it. There's this idea that teenagers are moody and cranky and irritable, and it's just all you have to do as a parent, or all you can do, is just try and keep your nose above water and tread water for a few years until you make it through those dark days, that dark valley. And there's a lot of hormones going on, folks, and there's some legitimacy to that. But let me tell you something that's going to step on a lot of toes, my own included. A huge chunk of the reason that modern teenagers are the way they are, because they weren't always, they weren't, is because they're exhausted, they're worn out, they're constantly going from one thing to another with very little rest in between at all. And we haven't spent any time with them to develop a relationship. Folks, it's really similar to the Marine Corps in that sense. Your very best officers, without fail, are the ones that develop relationships with their Marines. And any branch. I have no qualms about spreading that to every other branch of the military. Your very best officers and staff NCOs are the ones that develop those relationships with those young Marines. That doesn't encourage fraternization. It doesn't mean that you're going to get familiar, that you're going to be buddy-buddy friends, which is another mistake parents make with your children, or in the case of the military, with those Marines. But it means that you spend enough time with them doing the things, whatever it is, together, that you develop those Marines, or in the case of our children, they develop the understanding that you're really interested in them. Doesn't matter what you're doing, that's not important. And it doesn't matter what the results are, that doesn't determine whether you really care about them or not. You just are interested in them. And you can't do that, folks, with their relationship with God and the church, or with our relationship as parents with our children, if you don't have time. And the left has known that for years. For a century, they've told us that's what they're going to do, and they've been doing it, and we've been going along with it. The school year is insanely too long. Find a teacher. Find somebody that you really trust as a moral individual, that's a teacher, counselor, administrator. And if they haven't sold out, they're going to tell you, we could easily take hours off the school day and months off the school year and produce not only the same quality, but a better quality student, and have them be strengthening those relationships with their parents and with their church, with God. 100%, no doubt, absolutely zero doubt. You know why we won't? This is really going to irritate some people because we don't want to. We don't really want our kids at home. We want to do what we want to do. We want to drop them off at daycare. I'm guilty of it, folks, but that's the truth. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless your marriages. God bless your children if you have them. God turn us back to you. We'll talk to y'all again.